Alex,
How are you? Thanks for joining us today.
I'm great. So I'm hoping you can see my screen and hear me clearly.
Yes, yep, we've got you. We can see you, and I can see your screen really, really well. Thank you.
Great. Um, Thank you everybody for joining. Look, I hope by the end of my talk, I will have inspired some of you, those who aren't already doing it, to add your sightings of wildlife to a nature platform, and also for you to realize what a great tool it can be um, for collating and collecting information for research projects that your group is trying to get an answer for. So yeah, hopefully that's what we'll deliver. To begin that inspiration, I want to tell you three butterfly stories. The first one, Susan took this photo and it was a bit tatty, and she thought it actually was this common blue butterfly down here. So she wasn't going to enter it. But fortunately for us, she did. She put it onto NatureMapr, and as soon as she did, our moderator, and I'll explain what a moderator is later, but our moderator, Susie Bond, she emailed quickly back to Susan and said, Susan, this is incredible. I think it's either a Bathurst copper, which is an endangered butterfly restricted to the Bathurst area, or a new species. So yeah, much excitement. This was in August 2021, in the middle of COVID. Susie sent the record off to Michael Mulvaney to check whether it was a new species. He actually did find that it was a new species and called it a violet copper. In the time that he was deciding that it was actually the violet copper and not the Bathurst copper, with all the excitement, we asked other nature mappers to look out for it, and 12 of them actually made 177 sightings. So not only within 3 years has NatureMapr discovered a new species, but it begins to document the distribution of that butterfly. And why that's important is that it has a really complex relationship with an ant. So at about this time of year, the adult is flying around. The female lays the eggs at the base of blackthorn, Berseria, and the little eggs hatch and the caterpillars climb up. For the first little while, they're just on their own, but as they get bigger, they feed at night, and during the day they walk their way down to, crawl their way down to the base of the Berseria, and they live in a little covering that's made by this cocktail ant, and then they go back at night, and as they're getting larger, the cocktail ant actually milks them by tickling their tummies with their antenna and gets the protein. They're doing that during spring. At around, by Christmas time, the caterpillars have gone about a metre deep down into the ant's colony, and that's where they pupate. So during spring, it's feeding on the leaves. During autumn, it's underground. So if you're doing a burn, it's really important that that burn doesn't happen in spring, otherwise you're going to cook the butterfly caterpillars. Or if you're doing it in autumn, you're going to be encouraging Berseria. So not only has Susan identified a new butterfly, but she's actually changed the fire management that's occurring within the range of this butterfly from a sighting that she originally wasn't going to put up. Christine realised that this butterfly was flying a bit differently, but she didn't have a clue what it was. When she put her record on NatureMapr, it was the first time that that butterfly had been seen in the ACT for 20 years. And it was the first time in 25 years that it was recorded breeding anywhere, because not only did Christine capture the butterfly, but she captured it laying its eggs. Now, as this photo indicates, it does have a pretty amazing relationship with an ant. In this case, it's called a coconut ant because when you squash it, it smells like a chocolate crackle. And this butterfly lays its eggs near the ant's colony. The ant takes the eggs back into its colony, which is generally under fallen timber and under the ground. the butterfly eats the eggs and larvae of the ants over winter, and in return gives it a protein which keeps the ant colony going over winter. In spring, the ants basically shepherd the caterpillar up into the leaves of saplings of wattles and gums, and again milk it, and again it feeds at night, and the little ant builds its base camps, which is this here, which is made out of frass, which is sort of a mixture of wood material and soil. And you can see over here, there's a big frass over its nest. So given that this butterfly is so rare that at this time, there was only one other breeding location, and that hadn't been recorded for 25 years. So we asked people, we're interested in finding some more of these nests. So we asked people, could you keep your eye out for the nests of the coconut ant? And we had 577 nests reported. Then from amongst those NatureMappers that had reported, we asked for volunteers, and we trained 15 up to look for caterpillars and eggs. And from that, they actually have discovered 11 of the 12 known breeding locations of this butterfly. One of those locations was being overrun with blackberries, so it became a high priority for control. So again, Christine has influenced what's happening on the ground. Matthew knew that the pencil blue butterfly was rare in our region, but what he didn't realize is that, and he went looking for it, and what he didn't realize was no one else had ever photographed it in the subalpine. So when he took his photo and put it on NatureMapr, our butterfly moderators thought, hey, this is not the usual pencil blue. And again, they investigated it, and it's a whole new species. So, but both of the two new Australian butterflies in the last 5 years have come from NatureMapr. Again, it's now called the spotted trident blue. The spotted trident blue has a relationship where its caterpillars just feed on a Hakea species that occurs up in the subalpine, and it again has special management requirements. So again, putting in those records out there can actually have quite a big impact to what happens on the ground. Now, obviously, I'm trying to woo you into using NatureMapr, and I've chosen some pretty extraordinary examples, but they're not out of the ordinary. So over the life of NatureMapr, on 183 occasions, NatureMappers have found new locations of 36 different threatened species. And for a few of those threatened species, NatureMappers have now established the majority of the national populations of where they are. So you can see how that has an impact. Roughly once a fortnight, we're getting a significant sighting coming in. So you can see if you've been going for over a decade, that's a lot of significant sightings and a lot of action on the ground. Now, some of those significant sightings perhaps aren't significant. We do leave it up to the moderators, and I'll explain what a moderator is. But say, for example, we've got Curtin Primary School recording all the wildlife on their school grounds. And one of their photos happened to be a jewel beetle that hadn't been recorded in the Woden Valley before. So that became a significant sighting just to encourage the school kids. But generally, they really are sightings that matter to conservation. Just as an indication to how significant can be to make sure you've got the eyes that people are out there seeing, being able to report what they're seeing. Just want to hit you with this stat. So in the last 10 years, the ACT government in 2010 had a list of 318 rare species, plant species. In the last 10 years, more new locations of those rare species has been found by NatureMappers than what had been found by any other means over the previous 110 years. So that's a pretty staggering difference. And it's meant that 55 of those rare plants were taken off because it was realised they weren't rare, but actually another 18 species were added that weren't realised actually occurred in the ACT. Now, although those thousands of records did involve hundreds of people, 85% or more of those records just came from 20 people. So not only is it important to have many eyes out there looking, but it's important to set people tasks that they can easily respond to. These figures are actually out of date, and it's been 3 years since I came up with those figures. And since then, a lot of the remnant rare plants were actually subalpine plants, which, again, people don't get up there that often to record. So there was questions about whether they were rare or not. 2 Lynham High students, Ned and Kieran, took it on themselves to visit every peak in the ACT and record the plants up there. 3 years into it, again, we're going to have to review the list because of their work. And just those 2 people have recorded as many subalpine rare plants as had been recorded any time previously. They have just got their license for the first time, so I'm looking forward to what they can do this spring. Now, I'm hoping that by now I've whetted your appetite and you're feeling guilty that you're sitting at home and you've got all those sightings on your computer or on your phone and you haven't put them up. So this is sort of just to go through the process of what happens when you put them up. So you take your photo on your phone or your camera and you're loading into the system. First go artificial intelligence. You'll have a guess what it is. With NatureMapr, we also ask you to have a go. Now, you shouldn't feel embarrassed if you've got no idea. We really want you to learn. So having a go helps you go through that process of trying to find out what it is. And there are field guides on the system to help, which I'll get to in a little while. Once it's in, depending on what it is, so if you say it's a plant, it goes to a group of volunteer moderators who will determine what it is. And we've got 120 of those, and some of them do plants, some of them do flies, some of them do fungi. And depending on what you say it is will depend on who gets the email to say that there's a new record come in. Now, those moderators range from people that are recognised as international experts. So Pino Lep does our fungi, and Michael Batley does our bees. We've got lots of others that are recognised as these are the Australian experts for those fields. But also, we have had moderators that are 10-year-old kids. And it doesn't matter if you're a 10-year-old kid, or an international expert. What matters is that what you're saying it actually is. So that 10-year-old Luke started off just doing magpies, and he was really good at identifying magpies. And he was able to do that and eventually spread his expertise through mentoring, and he actually became a moderator of all birds and then all plants, and then he went to university and he's too busy to do it anymore. So yeah, the moderators have a range of skills. We also have taxonomy moderators, but also area moderators, and this may interest a lot of you. So most of you belong to Landcare groups, and most of you will have in your group someone who just knows every plant or usually a bit more within your area, and they can become area moderators. So that if a record comes in from your Landcare area, they'll get an email and they'll be a moderator. We'd like to have at least 3 moderators moderate over one sighting so that they can discuss it between them and vary it. So once they've agreed what it is, the moderators also sorry, I should have said that before a sighting is verified, only you and the moderators can see the location. That's because we do hide the location of sensitive species, and it's the moderators who determine what's sensitive and what's not. We do have certain groups, such as the Canberra Ornithological Group for the birds or the Canberra Orchid Society, who basically arrange the moderation of those groups, and they'll determine which are the sensitive species or not. So it can be done locally. Once a species is ID'd, depending on how sensitive it is, either anybody can see the location or nobody can see the location, or just the location of the general area in which it occurs is given. That data, that information is then forwarded on to the Atlas of Living Australia, and if it's a verified record, it's also forwarded on to the Commonwealth's biodiversity data repository, which is just getting started. We also have automatic links to state agencies. So NatureMapr does operate nationally, though at the moment it's really only active in ACT and New South Wales. It is active elsewhere, but the majority of records are coming from those two areas. The link to BioLink is currently not operating, but it's shortly to be turned on, I understand. So that's the process. Actually, when you make a sighting, I'm not going to explain how you use the app, because actually most of our sightings come in from your home computers, and the app is a lot simpler. So it's a subset of what I'm explaining. So basically, you can click on a grey box and follow the links to where you've got your photo on the on your computer, or just drag it straight into the thing. Generally, most phones and cameras have GPS, so it'll strip the location out. If it doesn't, you can zoom in on the Google map and just click on the location, or you can enter the GPS coordinates directly. There's also a box which says you can suppress the location. So particularly if you're a private landholder and you really don't want other people to know what you're recording your land, you can click that box, and that then the information won't become generally known, and will only pass on to government agencies under the data agreement that we have, which has about looking after privacy. The data is also generally just automatically stripped, or you can add it in there. We ask you to make a guess for abundance. That's so we can look at the relative importance of your record, and you put it into categories 1 to 3, 3 to 15, 15 to 100, 100 to 1,000, more than 1,000. And then we ask you to sort of identify as far down as you can go. And then you can put a description for public use. So you may want to make a note to a moderator, something about it had an orange underside, but I didn't photograph it. Or one for yourself, which might be, you know, I recorded this by my front gate, or something that only you'll see. Depending on what you put down as what it is, you may get further questions, and that can relate to further studies. So if for example, you put gang, you'll see we'll come to a gang study later, but there are additional questions. So nesting site comes up for birds because we don't want to give away the nesting sites, and the other questions related to specific questions that related to scientific citizen science studies. iNaturalist has a pretty similar approach, and technically there's nothing that NatureMapr can do that iNaturalist can't, but there are differences in culture, if you like. iNaturalist has an international focus, where NatureMapr is more local. The thing about iNaturalist, it does have that international focus, but it's quite expensive to maintain a platform like NatureMapr. I know every month we have 50,000 individual users, and they're downloading 1 million separate pages a month. Each of those pages has multiple photographs. So although we're each time we download from the cloud, it costs us a very small fraction of a cent for each photo. over a year, that adds up to $100,000. So it can vary. So with the NatureMapr, we haven't had funding until sort of this year, so we're forced. And there was a misunderstanding between us and a South Coast group, so that did mean that we weren't really catering for what they wanted. So for them, iNaturalist was a better one. So I advise you to look at both. The thing is, it's really important that you enter your data into iNaturalist or NatureMapr. It's the sin if you just put it on Facebook, because then it's lost to the science world. And it's a mortal sin, and you're going to suffer in hell if you've just got those things sitting on your computer and not putting them into either of them. So please add them in. I'm putting NatureMapr, so you have to take what I say with a grain of salt, because I'm pushing NatureMapr, but please look at both. But one of the reasons is we do have a local focus which does cater for landowners. So this is Caroline's property. It's a 400-hectare property. She's taken 949 sightings that she's placed up, and it's 617 species. From that, she gets her own species list. So she can provide a field guide for the daisies on her property, or the spiders, or all plants, or all insects, or whatever she wants. She also gets a list of the significant species on her block. So she's got 31 significant species, which helped her over the life of NatureMapr. She's actually converted her property to a conservation area and is receiving payments, conservation payments. So having this information has helped her. She knew she had some of these important species on the block, but others she didn't until she listed them. If we zoom in on this pink-tailed worm lizard skin, under the comments, our one of our reptile moderators has said, look, you have to be a bit careful with skin, saying it's something because it could be another legless lizard reptile. And Will's given a bit of advice about what to look for. In the end, it was agreed that it was a pink-tailed worm lizard. In this photo, you can see this is a weevil which has been introduced to Australia to control Scots thistle. So her listings include both exotics and natives. She listed this plant here, which is Tweedia. I saw that, and I work on my Landcarer in Red Hill, and I said, hey, Caroline, this is a really bad weed. You've only got 1 to 3 plants. That's what she recorded, the abundance. Go out and control it as soon as you can. And Caroline said she could, but because it's in a public, the comments were in that public comment section, Mike from another Landcarer said, hold on, Caroline, I've been digging out thousands of these and it'll come back unless you really get the roots. And Caroline, being Caroline, she went out, took the plant out, and there's the photo of the plant with the roots. Now that's pretty common. So on 126 occasions, NatureMappers have been the first time that a particular weed has been, or a particular plant has been seen in the ACT. So they're really catching this plant first time when there's only 1 or 2 individuals. And on about 1,500 occasions, it's been the first report of at a new location of a very high risk weed. So that's a weed that you'd want to go and do something about. Now that might be something like the Spanish lavender, where we generally get back to the persons that reported and saying, look, it's easy to pull out by the hand. Can you go out and get it out? And they've done that. They didn't do that in South Australia, and there's whole hills of it in Adelaide. Full-of-tie grass is one that our region really want to get on top of quickly. So basically, as soon as that's recorded, there's a team going out from the ACT government trying to control it, and there's quite a program of follow-up. Something like African lovegrass, which is already well spread, but if there's a new location that's remote, so up in Namadgi, again, it's a high priority for control. So putting those things up can actually make quite a big difference. And it's a lot cheaper and quicker if you can get a weed. Well, there's only 1 or 3 plants. Just basically, our weeds people have worked out, each time they go out to get one of those new records, it costs them $400. If they left it a month and it started to spread, it's going to be $4,000. If they've left it a year, we're up to $40,000. So you can see how putting those records on NatureMapr is really cost effective and great for conservation. We've had some impact with invertebrates. So the popular bark aphid, it was the first time it was recorded on mainland in Australia. But really, this also highlights that it's important for people to set tasks and to keep people to look out there, because with that privet leafhopper, this was actually the first time it had been photographed on a public website, but actually it'd been known in Australia for 5 years, but the entomologists hadn't let anybody know. So it would have been, we spent ages trying to work out what it was. So it would have been good to have that overarching advice about, yeah, these are some of the insects we need to look out for. This is another Landcare site. So in this case, it's only a very small area, but there's about 4 or 5 landowners that own small rural residential blocks, and enabling them to have their own area. Again, they get those field guides that Caroline had, but also they could take part in some more wider science studies that were going over. So they actually had one of the few little eagle nesting sites in our region, and at the first nest that they had in their area, a camera was put up by the study team, and it actually showed wedge-tailed eagles coming and stomping on the eggs, and they didn't want the competition from the little eagles. But in the next site, little eagles were successful, and it was part of the movement of the study. So in some ways, by putting those records on, they could be linked into the study. Also, they're just 1 kilometre from the Murrumbidgee and the Rosenberg's goanna. There's been study going on which has involved finding out that it's got a really complex arrangement to exist in our part of the world, where it has breeding, overwintering, and foraging areas. And the faces of the goannas is like our thumbnail, so they've been able to check the faces that they see, take the photos of the goannas on their property, and it's contributing to the photo because they can see where have these particular goannas been seen before. So again, the NatureMapr is enabling that group to be involved in 2 scientific studies. The Landcare group that I'm at, we were trying to stop from development this piece of bushland, and 2 of our members, Jackie and Jenny, noticed a gang nest, and we asked, wow, how important is a gang nest? So we asked the experts, and were told that at that time there was only 1 other known nest in Australia. So we said, beauty, and the development stopped. But then we thought, oh, I bet the developer's going to come back and say, it's only important because you haven't looked elsewhere. So we said, well, how would we find gang nests elsewhere? So we asked people to place images of when they saw gangs in and around hollows on either NatureMapr or iNaturalist, and we got 1,400 photos back. We arranged people to watch them, and for a brief period with gangs, the chicks poked their heads out the hollow. So by watching them, you can say, oh yes, that definitely was a hollow, and roughly about 8% of the hollows that we watched had gangs in. So we've gone from basically 1 hollow to now we're getting pretty close to 100, and that's the red of the dots across Australia. So that was a pretty easy way of learning something that wasn't known. We also did something similar for diet, and actually through the citizen science recording images of when they were seeing gangs, most of what's known about gang diet has come from that study. Again, something that your group could do depending on whatever you're interested in. Another 2 Landcare groups, well, park care groups in the ACT, were complaining to the ACT government that their birding program was detrimental to their orchid diversity. And look, the ACT government couldn't say you're right or you're wrong. So it was agreed that they would do a joint study together where the area of interest was divided up into fire history, and then little markers were put, 140 were put against the different fire histories, and people were asked to photograph any orchid they saw within 50 metres of a picket. And again, it didn't matter if they photographed a non-orchid, because there was orchid moderators looking at what they came in. And basically, it came up with conclusions which actually was saying the fire regime that was underway was pretty good for the orchid diversity on Black Mountain, but it did need a bit of nuancing. So it did alter the management. My last example is, again, the ACT government was interested in how can we encourage pollinators within urban Canberra. So again, they used that point approach, and people were asked to photograph any insect they saw in a flower. Now, there are differences between people's ability to see insects and to photograph them. So the quantitative data that the project got off wasn't very good, but the qualitative was really good, and it did actually enable people to determine what insects are out there in terms of the pollinators within urban Canberra, and what flowers are best to use if you're trying to encourage them. Finally, anybody can establish their own collection if you're interested in a particular aspect. So one person was interested in, well, what insects are visiting this area? So by establishing a collection and getting people that into collection, yeah, you can get people to add to the information for what you're interested in. So look, I hope I haven't rushed too quickly, but yeah, I'm hoping that you are inspired to think about using either NatureMapr or a naturalist to get what you've seen onto the record, and also to think about using your groups to answer some of the questions that you want answered. Thank you.